All right, everybody, welcome back to the Full Court Trap Podcast. We got Blake, Jake, and Brandy all in the house. I am Luke Tackett. We had a big week of college basketball, a lot of action going on. Not going to try and recap every single thing, but what I want to do is start off with you, Blake. What was your highlight from this week of college basketball? We had a lot of interesting games and a lot of performances to pick from, but out of all the results, which one stood out to you the most so far throughout this week and going into the weekend?
Mine's actually coming from the Big Ten. It's Ohio State's comeback win against Purdue at Mackey Arena. Ohio State was down 13 at the half, 41-28. Ohio State comes out in the second half after losing John Mobley and Colin White, both freshmen. Colin White hasn't really produced much this year, but Mobley's been one of their most consistent scorers all year. So Mobley ended up coming back in the second half. Only scored 9, but had a couple clutch buckets. Micah Parrish went nuclear, had 22 points, a few threes. I think it was like 6-8 from three. And then he also nicked in 7 boards and 2 assists. And then you had Bruce Thornton, 11, 5, and 6 against one of the best point guards in the country. So I think for that Buckeyes team has been really up and down this year to go into Mackey Arena, which I think they were on like a 26-game winning streak at Mackey. And to be able to break that record or winning streak is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, the Mackey Magic, as they call it. Me and Sully got to talk about that a little bit on the instant reactions. That was definitely a hell of a result there for an Ohio State team that's looking to get on the right side of the bubble. But Brandy, I'll turn to you next. Out of all the results this week, which one stood out to you the most?
Yeah, I'm going with last night's Maryland beatdown of Illinois on the road. They won by 21 points, and it was led by their really impressive front court of Julian Reese and Derek Queen, just absolutely dominating on the glass every chance they got. And this is Illinois' second loss in a row now. And Maryland kind of had a trend of collapsing in the second half in away games, and they started off the second half of this game on an 8-0 run. So I was really impressed by that. And they out rebounded Illinois by 1 rebound, and that's the best rebounding team in the country. So I thought that was super impressive. And Illinois has to get back on track for their seed line in the tournament. They were getting a lot of hype heading into conference play and have been just a tad disappointing so far. But that was a huge win for Maryland, and just feel like, the sky's kind of the limit if their front court is clicking on all cylinders. And Gillespie looked good in their back court too. So really impressed with that Maryland win over Illinois.
Yeah, you mentioned the Illinois struggles. I think this is 3 out of their last 4 that they've lost now, and this is a team that was getting a lot of hype and a lot of love recently, and deservedly so. When they're on, they look like a great team, and they've obviously strung together some good results so far in the season, but they got to figure out how to get back on the tracks here. Brad Underwood, he's got a lot of work to do because that was a pretty tough result to take, especially on your home court. But Maryland, they're a decent team. Me and Blake have mentioned it many times before. This Maryland team is definitely not one to take for granted, and they can get you on any given night. But Jake, out of all the games this week, what did you think? What stood out to you the most?
Yeah, I'm going with the Texas A&M Aggies win over Ole Miss. I'm surprised by the result considering how good Ole Miss has been to start conference play. They won at Alabama. Texas A&M did get Wade Taylor back for this one. So, but I mean, if you just look at the box score, I feel like the result is a little bit surprising. Neither team shot over 40%. Texas A&M almost doubled up their turnovers than they had assists, 11 to 20. So, I mean, and they were still able to come out with the win, so that's big time for them. Zurich Phelps and Wade Taylor didn't even hit a 3, 0 for 11 combined. But the gravity that Wade Taylor holds. So, yeah, it's big for them to go on the road and get one. They were going to be looking at 3-3 conference if they weren't able to get this one. They moved to 4-2. And if you're Ole Miss, I feel like this is kind of a tough one to let slip just based on how, well, the defense was really good still, but they weren't able to get the win. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was definitely a game for SEC standings, getting separation. Texas A&M and Ole Miss as well. They both needed that win, and obviously the Aggies came out on top there. And I'm going to stick with another SEC team for mine, and it's not really because of anything crazy that happened. I mean, it's Florida getting the win against South Carolina now. That might seem kind of like an unorthodox pick here because, Florida heavy favorites, obviously. South Carolina's a bottom tier team in the league, but Florida was on the ropes in this game. Like, it looked for a little bit there. They were down 5 with about a minute 15 to go, and South Carolina just banked in a 3, and I thought it was curtains from there. I was tweeting over on the Full Court Trap page that South Carolina was on the cusp of their first SEC win, but Will Richards said not today, and I really thought it was impressive to see the resolve of that group to not fold after they had gotten down big. I mean, they were down by as much as 14, and you had to win that game. Like, if you're Florida, you're in the hunt for an SEC title. You can't afford to drop that game. Like, dropping that. Auburn, they survived that road test against South Carolina. Alabama went in there and took care of their business. So Florida, obviously, if they want to be up there with the better teams in the conference, they needed to show that as well. And to pull a result out there when it felt like everything was going against them, they would make plays to chip away at it, and South Carolina would come right back. It just really impressed me. And you saw Todd Golden, he was super hyped after the game, and I think he knew how much that one meant for his group because that was definitely one you couldn't let slip. And I mean, on the South Carolina side of things, it's just brutal. They keep getting in these close games like against Auburn and now here against Florida, and they just can't find a way to finish it off. But I think that's kind of a part of the reason why most of us expected them to be towards the bottom of the SEC. Just really not enough juice on that team to make some noise. But Colin Murray-Boyles, he's been a hell of a player so far this year. And Zachary Davis, he had a great game. But, yeah, my big performance of the week goes to Florida. Hats off to you all. You went into a tough environment, almost fell, but found a way to dig yourself out of the hole and make the winning plays down the stretch. And Will Richard, he had cold-blooded dagger there at the end with that layup. But on the recruiting side of things, we got to talk about something that happened in the wee hours of the morning last night. Caleb Wilson, this long, dramatic recruitment has finally come to an end. He will be a North Carolina Tar Heel. Hubert Davis, everything has gone wrong for him this season, but he's finally got a W under his belt. Caleb Wilson, he's going to be a Tar Heel. So it seemed like in this recruitment, Blake, I mean, you kind of specialize in the recruiting area over there at Recruit Zone. From about November to December, it almost seemed like this was Kentucky's prospect to lose, but something took a turn there down the stretch. A lot of people speculated it was the NIL money and all that stuff, but obviously Hubert got himself a great get here. And what's Carolina getting with Caleb Wilson?
They're getting a really high motor player. He's super explosive around the rim, athletic, and he's versatile on both ends of the floor. He rebounds offensively really well. And like a comparison I kind of see in him is Jaren Jackson Jr. I was watching some film of him yesterday because we were waiting like 2 hours for his decision. It was getting to the point where I almost fell asleep waiting, but yeah, I was watching film. I watched a little bit of like fours in the NBA, and I ended up deciding on Jaren Jackson as the closest guy that fits his mold.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I'll be first to admit I wasn't staying up for this one. I kind of had a feeling where he was going to end up landing. And Jake, obviously, we're the known Kentucky fans of this podcast, so we got to talk about, at least for a moment, what this means for Kentucky moving forward, because this was a guy that for a while there Pope kind of thought he had in the bag. So what's this mean for our Cats moving forward? Is it going to be turn into a guy like Nate Amon in the freshman class coming up, or is it going to be going towards getting a guy in the portal? What's the next step here for Pope? This is kind of his first high-profile recruiting loss.
Yeah, I think they'll just stick with the 3 freshmen they have and then hit the portal. Bank on the returners. You'll probably get Owe and Garrison back as known contributors, and then the 3 freshmen, obviously. I mean, like the 3 current freshmen on this current team, and then plus the 3 freshmen coming in, and then obviously hit the portal. But I don't think it was as big of a need for Kentucky as it was North Carolina. Hubert Davis desperately needed a win in some regard. We don't know any of the specifics in terms of money, how much each team was offering, but it was reported that Caleb Wilson was enamored with how Ian Jackson's playing and the freshman minutes that they're getting at UNC. I think it was Joe Tipton who reported that that's what really did it for UNC, but good for him, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he made the decision that he wanted to. He's going to Chapel Hill, and we mentioned it for Hubert desperately needing to win. Brandy, this was, I mean, we can't undermine how big this is for him because the fans in Chapel Hill, they are not happy with him right now. And I think that a move like this, it can buy him enough grace to get him into next season, no matter how bad this season ends. And we made a whole video on the track of this season for Carolina right now, and it's not looking like it's going to end too well.
Right. They're 12-8 on a 2-game losing streak to the likes of Stanford and Wake Forest. And they haven't even played Duke yet, and they have to play them twice this year, like they always do. So things are looking kind of grim when it comes to tournament possibilities for this UNC team. They don't have a solid win under their belt, and they're losing games that they should win. So this team is really talented, though, which is what's odd to me. So yeah, this recruiting win for Hubert is huge. They needed something. Their fan base needed something. He needed something. And Ian Jackson's actually done really well for them this year, especially as they've gotten into the thick of conference play. So it doesn't surprise me that that played a part in Caleb's decision because he started the season off a little bit slow, but I mean, he has solidified himself into lottery talks now, kind of how people expected towards the beginning or before the season. So yeah, UNC needed this because Hubert's Hubert's hot seat is or his seat's warming up a little bit, I think. So
I'll tell you something else they need tomorrow. They need a win against Boston College because, I mean, they've already dropped a game against a quad 3 team in Stanford at home that they could not afford to drop, and they did that. And then this next week, they have to go to Pitt and to Duke. And this is a spot where you hope, if you're a Carolina fan, that they pull out a result, but I'm just not so sure if I see it right now. Blake, we made a whole video before the Wake Forest loss on North Carolina. This is kind of tracking away from Caleb Wilson a little bit, just the overall state of the program. So now that we're past that Wake Forest loss, they have the loss of Stanford under their belt. Really, the only resume opportunities they have going down the stretch is the 2 games against Duke, which I'll be honest, it's not looking likely that they win that one. And then they've got Clemson and 2 matchups against Pitt, but that's about it right now. So does this team find a way into the tournament and find their way into that field of 68, or is it just not happening for Hubert this year?
To put it simple, no, they're not making the tournament. I don't see any world where they beat Duke once or twice, let alone once. This UNC team, we've talked about it, I feel like a million times at this point. Their front court is awful. Hubert Davis struck out on likes of Adu Thiero. I forget who else they were targeting as well. Instead,
Cliff.
they settled. Oh yeah, Cliff
Cliff.
Amarui.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they settled with Cade Tyson, who looks like one of the worst transfers I've ever seen in college basketball. I
They
mean
wanted
that
Coleman
most
Hawkins too.
respectfully. Oh yeah, Coleman Hawkins, and then Kansas State with
It was
their
just a big
mid-ass
whiff.
team put up like what $2 million to get him, and he's been average there. Yeah, that this UNC team sucks. Seth Trimble, we talked about him a little early on. We were thinking he was going to be like a breakout player. I think you
Yep, it was
hinted
me.
towards that, Luke.
Yep,
But
it was me.
he got hurt recently, I think it was, and then he's just struggled at like coming back ever since. Elliot Cadeau, he's actually picked up his play. I feel like recently had like a 14 point, 13 assist game. I think it was 12 assists, something like that. R.J. Davis, you know what you're getting out of him. Like 15 points on 28% shooting, kind of like a Caleb Love situation. Ian Jackson, he struggled the past couple games, I believe, but he's looked really good, I feel like, for a majority of the season. But yeah, this UNC team, to put a bow on it, they suck. They're not making the tournament. And I'm going to stick with that word until I see them beat Duke.
Yep. It's a shame that we're gonna have to see Ian Jackson lighten up the NIT, but Brandy, that looks like it's where it's headed. Blake made his claim. We know where his thoughts are on this team. So do you kind of reflect those thoughts that he has? Is this team just kind of doomed for a bad year here and misses the tournament completely?
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. I think they're projected 10 seed right now by Lenardi. They just, I mean, if it's a huge if, like you said, they can pull off a win against Duke, because I don't even think 2 wins is even a possibility at this point. And even if they do that, I still just find it hard to see them in the tournament because they still have to go on the road to Pitt, which is a decent team in the ACC. They're kind of right behind Louisville. And then they have to go on the road to Clemson, which Clemson, they're okay this year. And I just don't see them coming away with even both of those wins on the road against Pitt and Clemson. So I I find it hard to believe this team is going to actually make the tournament, which I guess that means 2 tournaments that they would have missed if that ends up happening under Hubert Davis, which at a school like UNC is unacceptable. So,
Yeah, and I mean, I talked about it previously, and when we were heading into conference play, it kind of just seems like all of UNC's whiffs on non-conference games where they had a lot of quality opponents where they could have got wins and tight matchups that feels like it might be the nail in the coffin for them. And then you mix in that the ACC is just very weak as compared to past years. But Jake, before we head off and discuss another subject, what do you think about Carolina? Are we going to do a clean sweep here of them not making the tournament?
Yeah, they're not gonna make it. I think Hubert has done a horrible job this year, both coaching and building the roster. The building the roster plays into how the season is going, his coaching. But I mean, front court is just absolutely atrocious. We've talked about it like 10 million times before on the podcast, but like I don't know, you just can't like look at the starting like five and look at the backup five and look at the starting four and look at the backup four. It's like there's no way these are starting players at UNC, but that's beyond the point. But like what I was gonna say is as for Caleb Wilson, like it doesn't make sense. Like I don't think the decision makes like sense fit wise because like you have Drake Powell who is like a pretty similar archetype to him, and like he looks like lost a lot of the times. It looks like Hubert doesn't even know how to like use him. So I mean, I think Caleb is better than him, but and a little bit more versatile. But I don't know. It just like his other option was Kentucky, obviously, right? Like look at how Pope is using like Oweh and stuff. Like he's not that good of a shooter, but like he surrounds him with other shooters and allows him to just cut and do other things, play defense, stuff like that. So I mean, I was looking at like Caleb as like a Oweh type of player, but I don't know. I just thought the fit at Kentucky made way more sense, but it's
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, instead we're going to see him catching lobs from Elliot Cadeau in the NIT next year with Hubert
It's gonna be a
Davis.
brick
But
fest.
probably. But moving on from Carolina into another underwhelming team. Ladies and gentlemen, it only took 3 weeks into January, but the Arkansas Razorbacks have a conference win. Let's give it up for John Calipari. He finally got one.
Can we get a
Shoot.
moment of silence for them? I mean, that's
Yeah.
a hell of a win for them against a struggling Georgia team.
And the fact that they did it shooting 31% from the field and 13 from three, I mean, Brandy, they got the win here, but this was ugly basketball. Like, I'm not moved by
yeah.
this result whatsoever.
No, but I will say that they showed a lot of heart, especially at the very end, when he missed the second free throw and still went in for the layup and made it. They were down at 15, I think it was at one point in the second half. And this Georgia team now is reeling. This is a team that I definitely thought was going to be on the bubble and make the tournament. Now I'm kind of questioning that a little bit, but this was a really ugly game of basketball. Like it just really was not that fun to watch. And um but you have to hat tip Calipari because they he needed a win in conference play and he needed a win bad, and especially when you're at home. And I think really this game came down to the glass. They started rebounding a lot better in the second half, and Georgia is a super athletic and lengthy team, so beating them on the glass by I think 9 rebound. They out rebounded them by 9 was pretty impressive. Just a game full of turnovers though. Like both teams are in double digit turnovers. Yeah, you got to give credit though. Like a lot of us have probably, all of us have probably not spoken very highly of Calipari or Arkansas this year. But hey, he got a win. And not sure how many more of those are going to end up coming for this team. This is also a team similar to UNC that I don't think is going to make the tournament. So, Yeah, but good for them for getting a win when they much needed it. And kind of sucks for Georgia because I think Georgia had a better shot at making the tournament than Arkansas did. So I don't know what their outlook looks like now though, because this was kind of feels like a loss that they couldn't really afford um, if they wanted to get in the field. So
Yeah, no, definitely. Like for Georgia, this was a game where you go into it and you're just like, all right, we got to find a way to win. Like we can't drop this game, and then they drop it. But I mean, ugly basketball overall, Jake. It wouldn't be a proper Georgia Bulldogs basketball game if they didn't almost eclipse 30 free throws there. They had 29 on the night, and then Arkansas had 34. 1-0 in the post Boogie Fland era for John Calipari, but it's still just doesn't really look like cohesive basketball, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think there's like 50 combined free throws in the second half between the two teams. I think I saw it was like Arkansas had like more made free throws than they had like made field goals or something. I could be butchering that stat, but it was something bad. It wasn't fun to watch. I think that Arkansas really needed this one because I don't know how many more they're gonna get. With Boogie out for the rest of the year, obviously that roster is not looking good without him. Um, it felt like him and Adu were the ones carrying the show. And now he's gone, so it's like, yikes! Like DJ Wagner, point guard, one, and we saw how that looked at Kentucky a lot of the times. It was not fun to watch, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, definitely
With
not
all
the
due
answer.
respect. But I think he's improved, but I don't think it's good enough for Arkansas to be a major player in anything that they wanted to do in the preseason, at least. But yeah, it's disappointing that Boogie's out, but good for them to get a win. They definitely needed something to get their spirits right a little bit. You could tell it was kind of something was weighing on them a little bit with all the losses. Obviously, losing 5 in a row doesn't help, but yeah. And for Georgia, that's kind of rough. You got them without Boogie, and you drop that. That's kind of tough. And you're up 15. That's gonna sting, but yeah.
Yeah, I kind of have a feeling that Georgia loss is going to end up being a stain on my Wildcats resume towards the end of the season. I'm not super happy about that, but
At
the
least it was on the
thing
road.
yeah, it was on the road, true. But thing I am happy to see is Adu Thiero Blake. He had his moment there at the end with the free throw putback. He saved a lot of betting lives out there. I think the spread was 1.5, but Adu, I loved him at Kentucky. He's obviously done his thing at Arkansas. I have my opinions on John Calipari, but you're never going to hear a bad word about me for Adu Thiero. He had a hell of a performance there with 17, and yeah, it was a good win there for Arkansas. They had to have it.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one positive of that Arkansas team, it's got to be Adu Thiero. He's actually put up consistent numbers all year when you got guys like John L. Davis who forgot to play basketball without Dusty May. You got guys like Boogie Flan missing out some time. Jonas Adu missed out some time early on. Then you got Carter Knox, who you're trying to rely on, a 5-star freshman, and he's kind of been subpar at best. I mean, he did have 13 free throw attempts, finished with 13 points on the night.
11
DJ
points off
Wagner,
free throws, by the way, I will add.
yeah, that's 1 of 5 from the field. Kind of rough night. It's cool that he got to the free throw line that many times. Pulled a James Harden, but DJ Wagner, yeah, next person. Let's see. Trevon Brazil, he's kind of been underwhelming. Big Z, I'll end on him. Should have never transferred. Like he doesn't really fit the Calipari old school offense that's being ran still. Probably would have fit in better with the Pope offense. He's versatile enough, athletic enough to be able to be on the perimeter. Calipari doesn't like his big men being on the perimeter. Heck, he said something like preseason about Big Z, like it was going to get forced to be in the paint. So like that's kind of absurd to out yourself as a
You're
coach.
shooting
Come,
twos.
come home, Big Z. Come home, Big Z.
Uh,
No, we good. We good.
But yeah, Speaking of underwhelming players, I really want to hit on this a little bit more than you did, Blake. But John L. Davis, I mean, seriously, what in the world happened here? Because this was the guy, he was the number one portal player, kind of by all rankings and metrics going into the summer.
This is why you can't just sit in a corner as a guy who's a ball dominant player. Calipari's basically forced him to just sit in the corner, be like a secondary scorer almost. And when he was at FAU, he was not like a secondary guy. He was like the primary ball handler there. So I mean, when you're just picking and choosing guys who are like highly touted out of the portal instead of going for fit, then you're doing it completely wrong. That's why Arkansas is sitting at like 1-5 right now in the conference. That's why they've struggled all year scoring. That's why they suck, to put it point
Yeah.
blank.
Right. He last year at FAU, the majority of his possessions were pick and roll ball handlers, so around
Yeah.
22%, which was the most that he had. This year, his total possessions, he has 41% spot ups. So it's a huge difference in the
Yeah.
type of role that he's been asked to play this year compared to last year.
Yeah, a different kind of player here, but this reminds me of a time in the 2021-22 season when Kellen Grady, he said something in the post game about how Cal was using him. He said, "I guess I'll just go sit in my corner," or something like that. And this is like par for the course with Cal. He does have a history of kind of misusing some pieces. And yeah, I mean, this was a game both of these teams really had to win, but I feel like this could be the start of a bad spell for Georgia because they got to go to Florida on Saturday and they've got to play at Alabama a week from tomorrow as well. So things aren't getting any easier for Georgia. They're not getting any easier for Arkansas either. Both of these teams, I'll be extremely shocked if they make the NCAA tournament. But any final thoughts before we move on from the Arkansas Razorbacks here? Congratulations to John Calipari and the crew. Think we've kind of wrapped it up on that end, but
Yeah,
yeah,
Calipari used to be winning national titles, and now he's getting congratulations for winning one conference game.
yeah, it's really kind of sad to see what's happened, but we could talk about that all day long. But we're gonna get out of here. That was the week that was in college basketball. We've got a lot to talk about when it comes to the weekend here coming up in a bit. So yeah, this is Luke Tackett, Blake Smith, Brandy, Jake signing out. Full Court Trap podcast team. We'll talk to y'all in the next one.